Okay, Troy's interview, take 1, 3.
Hi, Troy.
Hi.
I'm Beth. I'd like for you to give us your first name and the title that you have at the Kent Company, and then maybe a little bit about what Kent does.
Okay. My name's Troy. I'm the Senior Vice President for Information Technology with Kent Corporation. Kent's basically a consolidator of operating companies. We're the corporate side of 4 operating companies, mostly in food and beverage, also some in the animal nutrition side. So we have an operating company around the manufacturing of corn wet milling products. We have a pet division, which is primarily cat litter focused, and then we have food, like a dry blending, flavorings, food and nutrition side, and then a full, probably the oldest brand we have, which is the Kent Nutrition Group, that makes everything for swine, dairy, beef, all feeds for those types of animals. So pretty wide variety.
All right. If you would talk to us about what business challenges you were trying to address with your Microsoft and Dynamics implementation. And I didn't say this, but if you can, when you give us your answer, if you'll say, I chose Microsoft Dynamics, and just use the name.
Okay.
That would be great.
Okay.
So, and what ERP systems were you using prior to Dynamics AX?
Okay. Our objectives setting out really were first around our customers' experience, and so customer experience could be anything from our time to serve them, like from an ordering process, or just in terms of getting them the right product at the right time, the right price, that type of thing. We definitely had financial things that we were after. So in terms of growth, we had some margin enhancements that we wanted to get from better understanding the cost, and then also the pricing of our products out in the market. And we had cost reduction type initiatives that we wanted to get to, as far as kind of shrinking the supply chain, making inventory reductions across all the companies. And we also just culturally wanted to be more of a data-driven company for decision making. And we have an acquisition strategy. We tend to buy companies that fit our company over time and do some growth that way. So the better back-end systems you have, the easier it is to integrate a new company, and you gain some synergies that way. So that's kind of the core of the business case that we presented as to why we wanted to move forward with this type of a project. You asked about the selection, I guess, of the product, so I can move into that. But Microsoft, for us, we went through a fairly lengthy selection process where a lot of our team had implemented other Tier 1 type ERP systems in the past, and we did include them in our initial analysis. It was a pretty formal RFQ process that we went through to request information, and we looked at Tier 2, Tier 3 vendors, M4, QAD, some niche products for the different operating companies, and ultimately we chose to go with Microsoft Dynamics. So.
She has a question of why did you eliminate them? Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can. Why did we eliminate? Yeah, I can talk about Oracle
maybe,
at least.
Yeah, or maybe even more like, to be positive, why Microsoft won over.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. So we got down to the Oracle e-business suite, and definitely had some experience with implementing Oracle before. Had never implemented the Microsoft side, but we had done Oracle before at other companies. And I think the reason that they were sorted out from my perspective is, number one was cultural fit. So Kent's a 100-year-old, privately held, family-owned business. And so that brings with it a certain culture and, positive things like long careers and, really taking care of family and things like that. And not that I'm not saying Oracle doesn't do that, but they come in my opinion, in more of a directive manner, like this is the best practice. If you don't do this best practice, you're missing the boat. I think the Microsoft and kind of the Alithya combination was more, well, let's see why you're doing that practice. What value is it bringing? And maybe it's something we do need to fit in versus more of a black and white perspective. I would also say they were significantly higher in total ownership costs. So not only licensing, but when you would go to hire any sort of consulting in that world, higher hourly rates, usually traveling further and things like that too. So I think from a cost perspective, and then finally, really the changeover to something like that, and this is more of a pro on the Microsoft side, is we were already a heavy Microsoft shop, so all the office tools, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, that type of thing. And we didn't want to fight changing over the user interface while we were changing everything else at the same time. So the comfort level with our user base was more with the Microsoft type look and feel than, say, an Oracle or an SAP. So some of the other positives, I think, for the Microsoft Dynamics itself, there was a lot of partners. There was a lot of industry resources available. It's pretty close to, from a development standpoint, it's pretty close to the other Microsoft development suite that's out there. So when you're a small town of 25,000 people in Iowa, sometimes it's hard to attract people. And we felt this was a skill set that was readily attainable in terms of getting employees that could help us with it. And I would say one of the big things was why we didn't go with more of a tier 2 or a niche type player is we knew Microsoft would be there kind of for the long haul versus I've seen other times where we've, somebody's maybe gone with a more of a tier 2 type vendor and then they're purchased by somebody, they decide to get rid of the product or they just sell it to somebody else and your support gets pretty sketchy and you're not sure where it's headed at that point, whereas we thought this was more of a long-term relationship. So.
Oh, great.
Hmm?
It's interesting. I always love hearing these things.
Yeah.
It's about somebody's story, you
Yeah.
know? So what was it that caused you to choose Alithya as your Microsoft partner?
So I think primarily when I think back to the different partners that we did look at, Alithya is more, for us, felt more small to mid-cap in terms of, kind of how they go to market, who they're, the segments that they most serve, the industries that they serve in. They're more in that small to mid-cap business, which we were probably one of the larger customers in that segment. So I think culturally it felt good. Like the conversations seemed more like they were with a Ken employee, happened to know a lot more about Microsoft Dynamics than we did, but versus having it with an outside consultant, less foreign to us. So I think that the cultural fit was part of it. A big piece of it was Alithya had actually written the process manufacturing capabilities that is in the Microsoft product. So, years before, they wrote the software for process manufacturers like ourselves versus, say, someone that makes toasters, discrete manufacturing. And so we knew that they had that breadth of knowledge because they were the creator of the software. So that was kind of a no-brainer for us to go with someone that had process manufacturing knowledge. They also had industry-specific knowledge, and I would say food and beverage, which is one of our core, and then also the pharmaceutical side. Some of our products go into pharmaceutical grade products, and there's a lot of regulatory and audit functions and verification processes in there from a testing perspective, and they had some knowledge of that. So I think that was a good fit. And I guess just, in terms of knowledge that was out there, they were a multi-year winner from a Microsoft partner perspective for ERP implementations. So I think that kind of shaped our decision to land with Alithya.
Great, thank you. So Kent named the Dynamics AX implementation Business Process Redesign. What were the project objectives?
So, and this was one of them that I sent back to her earlier. To me, the those objectives are all the ones that are in that first question.
Okay, so let's not
but
do
I did have something here on why it was named business process redesign versus just,
that's nice.
so I can go through that. So when we kicked this off from an executive standpoint, we chose to name it business process redesign. And while maybe it seems like a small thing, we didn't want to name the initiative, Microsoft Dynamics AX or our ERP implementation, because the expectation truly was to kind of take apart the organization as it was today, or multiple organizations, and piece those processes back together in terms of best practices within the industry. So business process redesign was more of a term that we rallied around, that we're actually looking at the optimizing our processes and changing our culture, not just a technology swap. Anybody can take this technology out and put in this technology, but that doesn't mean you're going to get any more benefit or good user adoption. So we chose to go down the redesign path rather than the technology swap.
I think it's very smart. I'm sure it worked out really well because of that. I mean, it's changing the thought and the mindset and the culture of
Yeah.
the company, which is cool.
Yeah, it's not just a IT
Right.
initiative. We made sure our chief operating officer sponsored it. We had some key executives along with myself to help set the direction, that the expectation was to really look internally and make some transformative changes, not just implement Dynamics AX. So.
Yeah. How, and this is going off the cuff if you don't mind,
Mhm.
but going along this line, how did you, so the shop floor owner or
Mhm.
things like that, how do people like that get involved in a business process redesign from a Kent standpoint?
For us, there's a core project team made up of several enterprise level process owners, like one of them's order management, one of them's finance, one of them's quality, one of them's production. And they basically go out into the organization, and we establish some roles called power users. And a lot of times those are, people off the operational floor or from the lab or whatever, that get a little bit more training. They get a little bit more understanding of configuration and setup. And so that's how they bring their, business needs and wants and kind of the things that have troubled them in the past that they didn't have capabilities to do, to the forefront of the project team. So, and then they also become the trainers. They're kind of the train the trainer approach, so that we don't have to have a core training team that goes out to everybody all the time. So
That's good.
yeah.
That is good. Yeah, cool. So, how did the relationship that Alithya had with Microsoft help your project?
Yeah, so especially our business, which is our largest operating company, that's a corn wet milling facility, which just means dry truckloads of corn come in one side and they leave as a bunch of products on the other side. There's no ERP system out of the box, whether it's any tier, Oracle, SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, that's going out of the box serve that process. It's 24/7, 365 days a year, and it's very different than other manufacturing processes. So we were able to leverage the Alithya's relationship with Microsoft, in that we could bring things to light that said, look, for a customer our size or our complexity in process manufacturing, if your solution doesn't do this, it's dead on arrival from a ERP solution perspective. So we were able to leverage those relationships to get in the room with people, kind of like we talked about that I'm doing here at the summit this week, to show the business reasons why their solution needs to do something maybe slightly different or totally new. And we felt that we could leverage that relationship to get in the room, have some good discussions. They weren't, they didn't implement everything that we wanted, obviously, because they have a lot of other customers to support. But certainly we had the conversations, and some of our biggest process issues were addressed over time. So without being introduced to those relationships through Alithya to full scope, I think that would have been a much larger task, a longer path to get to them. So
That's cool.
mhm.
I these are things that I haven't learned, so it's nice for me to hear them too.
Yeah, they also, for instance, when R3 came out, we found out about a program, basically, I think it's referred to as an RDP program, but basically a beta test program where you formally get involved with Microsoft to become in the beta group of one of these new releases, and not something that we would have probably been in tune with had we not been brought that through our partners. So that's some other value that we brought because we got to be on the forefront of defining some of those things for Release 3. So.
Cool. What benefits have you received from your Microsoft Dynamics AX implementation?
Yeah, so I would say the most important thing, and this isn't measurable by a tape measure or calculator, but I would say the most important thing that we've realized and maybe didn't even expect was there are conversations that happen that never would have happened before. When you kind of tear apart your business processes, talk about why they are the way they are, and put them back together, and then make things more visible, bring more people's perspectives into the design. Once it's up and running, you start to have conversations like, why is this way? Or I didn't know we sold that much of that item, or I didn't know the pricing was this, or inventories were that. And before, if you think about it, with at least the 4 operating companies, all those conversations maybe happened in the silos, but across the companies, it probably didn't happen much. So I think that was one, I would say completely unforeseen, but definitely beneficial, but maybe unexpected outcome of it. As far as the actual business case of why we did the initiatives that we did, well, we have seen inventory reductions. So the companies that are live have physically been able to reduce their physical inventories, so freed up cash essentially. We've also been able to make data visible. We had a goal of being more data driven, and so we've been able to do some business intelligence solutions on top of the AX transactional system that let individuals see data in more real time. We have real time inventory, which we never had before, so definitely from a supply chain standpoint and a production standpoint, that's been helpful. We've also been able to optimize some of our costs with regard to freight and purchasing, because we have been able to form a shared services division for all companies. Before, every company had purchasing, they had transportation, they had all these things across all the companies, and now we've been able to consolidate that, and so you can leverage your spending better when you have more transportation, for instance, or when your purchasing power goes up because I'm buying now for everybody. And so we have been able to follow through on some of those metrics and actually measure that we reduce cost in those areas as well. So I think in general, the visibility to information has been significant. I think the conversations that I talked about, I know that sounds general, but I go back to that's a culture changer, an organizational change type of a thing, has been beneficial. And then the more specific, tangible metrics that we were after. The one area that we're still pursuing, we are just now standing up some business intelligence solutions around sales and profitability. And so the margin enhancements that we were after, where we can specifically see like what's the margin on this customer or this item, we're basically working on rolling out right now. So some of those metrics that we expected at the outset, we'll just now be getting into. So that's an exciting phase for us too.
Yeah, when I read about, that's one of the things that Microsoft brings to the table. I'm like, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
To know that this customer, even though he seems like a great customer, is really not worth it.
Yeah.
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 And I don't know if you want to grab a swig of water.
Yeah.
Just because I know we're in the middle of this. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I getting a passing grade?
You're getting an A. An A.
Okay. I want to please here. I gotta
All right. I'm a people pleaser too, and just so you know, I never got A's in school, so that's why I give them. So.
Yeah. Well, she's not here anymore, but they know I don't say anything unless I believe it. So they've waited a long time to get this.
Yes, yes. Kim was sorry she couldn't be here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So you selected Alithya as your Microsoft partner in 2012. Why have you stayed with us, or why have you stayed with Alithya, and how has Alithya helped you to be self-sufficient?
Yeah, I think they've had an ability to adapt with us. I think some partnerships, and I'm talking about even outside of the Microsoft toolset community, but it's more rigid, more like this is our project methodology. We have these roles, you have these roles. Sign this contract. It's very dry, I guess, and kind of short like that. I think because of their ability to adapt and their willingness to adapt, if we said, hey, look, I know we started off and you had a project manager role, right? We have a project management office, so we want our project manager to run this. We'd talk about it, figure out what that means, what it doesn't mean, communicate about it, and maybe change it a few times, but ultimately we're happier about it because we've made that process somewhat how we wanted it. So I think their willingness to adapt and work through situations is more important than if you try to enter a long-term relationship, complex like these are, and get everything written down on a contract and take this real standoffish approach to each other. It's a nightmare and kind of a disaster waiting to happen. So I think the personal relationship and the accessibility to executives within Alithya. Certainly I was meeting on a weekly or every 2-week basis with senior team members from there, talking through what's next, how's it going, what's not working, changing resources in and out if we needed to. So I think adaptability and willingness to change to make us feel more successful is always a good thing. So, and I'm sorry, what was the second part?
I forgot. You're doing such a good job. How have we helped you to be self-sufficient?
Sure. So we had an intent right off the bat and we communicated with Alithya that we didn't want this to be a turnkey type of initiative where you roll in with a truckload of consultants because you know how to do this. You get us to our first go live, and then if we say, hey, we don't want to do the consulting model anymore, all that expertise and knowledge and walks out the door, and we're kind of left with, well, it's running, but I'm not sure how to support it. So it was a very planful approach that early on we had several functional consultants come in, train some of our people, our core team people up in those areas. So that's these enterprise process experts that I'm talking about. And then there was a kind of a sequence to the transition. The ones, as soon as we felt like we really had a grasp of that functional area, we started to rely less and less on their functional expertise, and we would only call them in when we faced something new, for instance. When we started to go to more the BI side of things versus implementing AX transactional systems, we leveraged more consulting from them, and we learned more, and now we've got a small team that does a lot of the business intelligence work. So I think the way they maybe set us up for longer term success is by not being our crutch, not requiring that to be successful we have to have a team of people either here or remotely constantly supporting. And they also have some fairly flexible, like we have a support plan with them. It's I don't know exactly, but it's maybe 50 hours set aside this year, and we agree on that up front. And then they have a support process where you have a functional question, you have technical issues, you want somebody on the phone for an hour, and you just kind of consume that throughout the year. So it's as we need it. It's to our discretion, and they just supply what type of resource we need. So in that respect, I think with what we've decided, and not everybody will decide to have an internal team, or maybe they want to outsource more longer term. We probably did more the other way and built more of those capabilities in-house, business and technical. But I think they're set up to be flexible enough to support both in the future. And when we go to something like 365 across our locations, we may leverage them heavily again, for that portion, and then slowly kind of take off on our own. So that's how I feel like we've been set up for success going forward.
Tell us about your experience with Alithya's customer support and optimization team. Is that what we just talked about, or is that different?
It's
I think
pretty
it's-
similar.
Yeah, because you talked about the set amount of hours and stuff.
Yep.
Okay. How has Microsoft Dynamics helped position Kent? This question is hard.
Yep.
When looking at Microsoft Dynamics, how has it helped you position your company towards the future?
Yeah, so from a high strategic level, Kent, like a lot of organizations, is focused on growth, and we've got strategic targets, out over the longer term planning horizon, and those are really around specific goals around profitability, kind of our margin portfolio, the data-driven decision-making culture that I talked about. And I think Dynamics AX has and will continue to help in all of those areas. We also do acquisitions from time to time, strategic acquisitions that we feel fit into our portfolio. And in the past, with all legacy systems in silos, you'd bring on an acquisition and it'd be months. Well, it wouldn't be months, it'd be years. And that company would still be forced to operate on its own infrastructure, its own duplicative expenses and things, not really leveraging the Kent Corporation side. And so I feel like going forward, if acquisitions continues to be part of our AX, maybe tweak some test scenarios, train their folks and deploy to them pretty quickly, since we've done it several times within the organization already. So I think the Microsoft tool has allowed us to get a baseline for data-driven decision-making, insights to customer experience, insights to our operational processes, our quality processes, more capability to support customers and vendors with things like EDI and portals and things like that going into the future is going to be table stakes for a lot of large customers. They don't, think of our personal experience with buying on Amazon. Whether you're buying on Amazon or you're buying from Kent Corporation and more of a B2B, you still expect certain things to be able to make it easy to do business with. And I think with Dynamics, we've got a very good platform to continue to grow down that path.
All right, so then if you were speaking to a manufacturer and they were embarking on a new ERP search,
Yeah.
what advice might you give them?
Continue.
Okay, so do you want me to speak the question again? Just do you remember it? It's just what if you're talking to somebody that's a manufacturer and
Yep.
they're starting on their ERP search.
Okay. I would give them the advice that, especially today, and it's been talked about at Summit a lot, I think I wouldn't look at it as an ERP search anymore. I think where this has evolved to is more of a, really think about your use cases in your business, what would bring value. So if your business outcome you want is enhanced margins, for instance, lay out those scenarios and say, well, what has to happen for me to get there? And then look at the specific solution set that Microsoft's offering and listen to your partners if you've got one engaged. To specifically go to those solutions. I think the days of the enormous ERP implementations with all the issues that come with that have started to become a little bit more modular. So if you really think about how your business runs and where you want to be in the next 3, 5, 10 years, and the flexibility now, the modular approach to the Microsoft suite, you'll probably end up with a better solution. I would also say there's a lot of hype out there around products. Most of the core, kind of top tier products will run a business. They'll take in raw materials. They'll let you produce something. They'll let you send an invoice and pay your bills. But you also have to focus on, how flexible and adaptable and open is that solution. I would look at what other things do you need outside of what's traditionally known as ERP, and say, how flexible does this platform make me to interact with things, whether that's in your supply chain or depending on your business. It could be in social media, it could be with other industry databases like retail information or things like that. And so really looking at, if I'm going to be transformative here, can I do it just on my own, or do I need to have a lot of interconnection out there, and does this platform support that? I would also say, don't get too ingrained in the technical. A lot of times if IT is leading this charge, and I'm physically in IT, but if IT is leading this charge on their own, it becomes a very technology-focused initiative, and I think you leave 50% of the value on the table if I'm just swapping technology A for technology B, and not really looking to redesign your processes, and not really looking for it's an overused term these days, but a true digital transformation for your culture. Then I think you leave something on the table, and you'll end up with a better, a newer, a much improved technology, but you probably won't leverage it to get all of the investment back out of it that you could have. So I would pay attention to organizational change, what's your culture ready to do, and selecting the tool is important, but don't put that on top of the list.
Okay, we go to BI. Whew.
Okay.
So why did you choose to leverage Alithya's BI Accelerator for your data needs?
So when we were ready to start down the business intelligence and analytics path, we looked at our skill sets internally. We certainly looked out at the gamut of products and services out there, and we knew we wanted a few things. We wanted to be able to create it and support it in similar skill sets to what we already had in-house. We wanted to do it fairly quickly because there was some real business needs to get to there. We didn't want to spend 2 boatloads of money to come up with it, because we weren't sure, were we looking to solve something for the next 2, 3, 4 years. We weren't quite ready to invest large sums of money to get this up and running, because we weren't sure what the endpoint was kind of going to look like yet. So what was brought to the table in this particular solution was, it was a very open. I would say the other thing we were looking for is not a black box. A lot of the solutions at the time were, hey, you give us our data and we go do this magic inside of this black box, and it works out great and you get these pretty presentations. But if you ever decide to do something other than us, we kind of just dump all this data on you, and you don't really have what you thought you had, in my opinion. So we wanted it to be just based on SQL Server, and kind of open and transparent about how you maintained it. And if we walked away from that particular partner or solution vendor, we could still manage it ourselves or leverage another partner to pick up where they left off. So we found that we were able to bring up a significant data warehouse capability within about 4 months, which in my historically, even before I came to Kent, to build out a data warehouse is a much longer time frame and much more expensive. I think this was a reasonable cost. We actually took some legacy system folks in IT, and they quickly came up to speed on this. They'd never worked in this type of environment before, and were able to pretty quickly be productive in it. And I think I spoke about adaptability and being flexible. It has the capability to attach to any data source. So a lot of our data now is in AX, but we have a bunch of other systems that we still want to merge some data from AX. We have lab systems, we have commodities purchasing systems, we have third-party industry databases and things like that. So it's very open, it's very flexible. Turnaround times to get data models stood up for us has been about 4 months. So each time we say, hey, we're going to really go put focus on this and bring a new model out, like production or inventory or sales and profitability or whatever, from start to finish, we've been doing that in about a 4 month time frame. So it kind of met all of our objectives without an enormous amount of expense up front.
There were apparently BI templates that your team created, and so what the question is now is if you can talk to us about them and how those templates are empowering your employees.
Okay. So we've deployed, I would say, into production. We use JET reporting components, which is an Excel add-in that allows you to connect to your warehouse and manipulate data. And we've rolled out, I would say, 30 or 40 production reports through that report server. So employees, I would say, have been able to leverage it in a couple ways. Like if we take a sales template, for instance, they've been able to use Excel, which they're familiar with. They kind of know how to use the interface of Excel, and they know what to do with the data once they get there. So that's a level of comfort for them, even though they're working on a new set of data. The tool that they're working in is pretty familiar. We've also, in the last year and a half or so, moved heavily into Power BI, so putting the presentation layer on top of these data marts or these data templates. And we've rolled out 2 of those so far into production, and we have a set of users that has been trained up on Power BI, and most of that training actually came off of the kind of a self-paced study off of the internet. It wasn't a formal training, but all different levels of users have been able to leverage this. I would say kind of the masses that need reporting to run the business are accessing things through JET to get these parameterized reports that they need. Analysts, so within marketing or finance or production or supply chain, heavy users are able to take Power BI and do ad hoc reporting against these templates. And then we've also developed some dashboards that are rolled out through the Power BI report server. And so if they have security, they are able to go in there and manipulate that data as well. So it's kind of a multifaceted approach to solve reporting needs for many different audiences, but all back through the same back-end tools. So that's been pretty successful and hasn't taken a lot of time to really get pretty proficient in it. And we're using the same model. We leverage Alithya resources more at the beginning to help us with the data warehousing and presentation of the reports. And now we have a couple people that are pretty versed in it, pretty comfortable in it, and so we scale up and use Alithya resources when we need to. Like if there's 2 or 3 of these projects going on, we'll continue to leverage them, but if not, then we just are able to do it ourselves. So,
how has your BI solution helped improve your agility in serving the information needs of your business?
I think in the past, we aren't a very analytical company, and probably for a couple reasons. We had siloed solutions, so tough to get data from here to here to make good insights and comparisons was one. And 2, the technology platforms that we were on were 30 years old. So basically, if you wanted a reporting change in our legacy world, you had to contact IT, tell them, specifically add this row, this column, make this calculation, and you had to do physical programming to go out and make those changes, run the report, print it on a big, printer and give it to somebody, or maybe download a file somewhere on a shared drive for them. Now it's fairly flexible, so we do a set of requirements with a lot of different stakeholders across the business. Let's say on a sales reporting initiative, they all say what their perspective is. Once that model is built, that group of stakeholders is very easy for them to go out and do ad hoc analysis against that model. The only time they really need to get IT involved after that is if they want to change the model. So if they say, I thought I wanted ship date, but I really want invoice date in the model, then that would be a change that would come back from IT, and we would test it and do those formal processes. But if it's just a matter of, yesterday my customer or my boss or my manager or my customer wanted these 3 pieces of information sent to them or something charted for them, I don't have to go to IT. It's my own mind and my own creativity of how I want to pull that information. So I would say turnaround time is very short now. It's whatever time they want to take to put the reporting together, at least in the models that we've got built. And I would also say it's given them the ability to relate information from different processes in the business that before were very, very siloed. And to get, to take quality data and compare it to production data, for instance, you're almost forced to look at two pieces of paper or yourself figure out how to relate those in Excel or something like that. So I think it's been pretty effective that way.
That's really interesting. Cool. Well, that's what we have.
Okay.
Yeah. This is just my question. Are you guys using Power Apps yet, or are you starting to?
We've messed around with them a little bit. Just yesterday we were with the Microsoft product managers to talk about some specific use cases that I'm sure our developer guys are going to want to dig into when we get back to solve some things. So it's a pretty interesting option that wasn't there before. So yeah. And you don't have to be all on D365 yet to use them, so that's good.
And that's why I asked you. I really just heard about them. I mean, I've heard the name for a while, but Microsoft is really into them this year.
Yeah.
And so I asked our VP of IT from the CE side, and
Yeah.
he was, oh yeah, and he was showing me this whole PowerPoint, so we're going to do a webinar on them, and
Oh, okay.
it's really quite exciting.
Yeah, it's the thing for us, or how we would want to leverage it, at least initially, is on the shop floor or in the heavy operations of the plants. You can create a simple app, and put on a handheld device that lets a worker be more efficient at what they do. Give them 3 buttons that follow their process instead of having to go into native AX and click OK and check this box and do the heavier user interface. And so that's what we're excited about, at least initially, is can we simplify the work for the person that's moving the inventory around or actually producing the product, so that they don't have to be experts of how to use the AX core system. So
Yeah, very cool.
yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
This was so helpful.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Again, A plus, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure I forgot half of what I was thinking.
But
And so they are parameter-based type reporting. You might be able to change the date or the item range that you want to look at, or whatever, depends on what the type of report is. And people are able to go out there, identify the folder, the type of report they want, bring it up, enter their parameters, run it however they see fit, and get that information right there. If they need to do more with it in terms of manipulating the data, they have it in Excel. You can do anything you want, graph it, send it, do a different calculation, whatnot. So we started very heavy in when companies went live with AX, we started very heavy in the jet reporting space, because those were the set of critical reports that had to be in place at go live to run the business. We didn't try to focus on big dashboards or presentation layer type stuff. We focused on the nuts and bolts of reporting. You need to get that.
yeah, I wonder who that is. Excuse me.
That's all right.